struggled with before they made these kind of changes as a roster. So maybe, I mean, realistically, this game is the best odds already, right, for Naventic. As long as the draft goes according to plan and it feels like Naventic gets what they want, this is going to be the best chance that they take out Tempo. They have no momentum against them whatsoever. It's the first game. It's Tempo's debatably worst map, and it's Naventic's very heavy comfort. Everything about this right now adds up to Naventic should be able to get a win. But again, if they fail here, I immediately lose a lot of faith going forward in the series. Speaking of getting what they want, these two teams actually share a lot of the same priorities right now on heroes. A lot of Uther, Dahaka especially, a lot of Leeming too, and then a new Barak. Tempo Storm, keeping with what they've done in the past on this battleground with the Tassadar ban, and Team Naventic, we know they just are not interested in playing Genji right now, so they're going to continue with their Genji ban. Yeah, that's such a disability that Naventic has opted into. I mean, we've seen teams in the past all over the world kind of just forfeit a specific hero in certain metas, but it is a colossal setback into a draft, especially in the second pick slot, because Tempo can essentially hand pick their first 3 picks for essentially free. They can calculate that out if they always know that ban for Naventic. So a bit of a setback, but it's not anything new. We've known Naventic is holding this true, and I would rather that constant stay there and see them grow than have them mix that up and suddenly deteriorate the development that these group of players has made. They go with the Dahaka, and they're going to go with the Greymane. Taking Greymane away from Uther as an enabler for him. Tempo Storm have played both Tyrael and Uther on Battlefield of Eternity this phase. Team Naventic also, Tempo Storm can imagine that Naventic will like to add a Lunara to the end of this draft, but they always wait until one of their last few picks to get her. So we'll see if they want to continue with that trend, or in moving more toward Greymane, if Naventic is starting to go away from the Dryad in favor of maybe even a more aggressive composition, although she would pair really nicely with a Greymane. Yeah, I really enjoy this rotation of Naventic with the Dahaka, concentrate on a little bit onto the side soak, but then a higher Greymane is going to allow them to be better into the race. Greymane, again, I'll keep saying it, he's changing depending on the team, all have different values onto him. The maps seem to be not as influential as you would expect, but I really appreciate that 1-2, having the Greymane on a map like BOE. Now, is this where we get Arthas in this rotation, or are they going to wait? No, they want to make sure to get their Illidan. Tempo Storm have played Illidan before, also getting Stitches. So even picking Stitches over a new Barak here, do you think that means we're going to see a new band from Tempo Storm? I'm expecting to see that band coming out from them, but again, like a new Barak is situational. I feel like it's becoming situational, I guess is the better way to put it in North America. He is far less as a generic, we think this is going to be the best, at least according to what we've seen in week number 3 of Phase 2. The priority of him has just dropped across the board. Naventic is going to ban out the Abathur, not allow the Abathur to get some of that side soak over the Dahaka, even out the scales of the globals. But yeah, I would expect that, but again, Arthas is a big one that you could be looking for whenever you have Illidan on your side. It just comes down to, is a new Barak objectively still too big of a problem? And Tempo's answering that right now. Yeah, Tempo Storm plays double warrior so much now because they have Cattle playing their primary warrior, and they want a secondary warrior for Fury, that I'm so surprised that they did not get Arthas along with the Illidan to make sure they could get him, because Dahaka was already picked. Generally, Fury is either on Dahaka or Arthas. So now potentially Tempo's either showing us that they have brought another warrior into their arsenal for Fury to play, or potentially this is going to be a solo warrior with Fury back on that, and then Cattle playing another sort of melee, maybe even flexing out to a ranged. We'll have to see. Leeming banned from Tempo Storm. Yeah, it is. The dynamic of Tempo Storm is really weird. Already, their melee already hybrided half-ranged, looking at phase number 1. Now you took their main pseudo-melee, whenever that guy, Psalm specifically is the one I'm talking about, moved to a range, then Cattle kind of got the melee at times, and now he's the main warrior. But Fury wants to be on warriors again. It is all over the place. I'm completely lost on who's going to be on what on the side of Tempo with what they have so far. Man, it's such a weird thing that has kind of overcome all North American teams. Tempo Storm is no exception with how many changes we see in the region. The new Barak, though, is locked in. Still available. Naventic. So then what is going to be the last, or no, excuse me, the next pick into this rotation?
I still think it'll be either Lunara here, or they'll get their support and then leave it to flex the damage dealer at the end.
I expect them to just go with the Lunara, just mainly because of the consistency you were referring to before, but they don't like prioritizing Tomster's hero too high. Instead, it's a Falstad. So mixing it up, still not picking the support, but a Falstad, man. That is now the third team in North America to see. No, it was only No Tomorrow yesterday. But still, a higher Falstad priority than we are traditionally used to.
A double global on Battlefield of Eternity, too, kind of reminds me a little bit of L5 versus Team Dignitas with the double global and just constantly keeping pressure on.
I love the strategy, but what L5 did was they also had a very mobile, very core skirmishing and good at trading three-man that allowed the double global to do what it did best. Right now, a new Barak Greymane is pretty effective. It has to be a support with hard CC. I see them moving into the Karazim. Or maybe it could be the Rhaegar, but the only one that I like to accent that three-man a lot is Mouth. With a reliable follow-up CC, a bit of poke, a reasonable amount of damage, like that is the one that can make that double side soak a viable one. But if they move into the Karazim, then Dahaka really is the only one, or at least only one at a time should be off side soaking.
We'll have to see. We've seen Tomster play Malfurion before once, but Karazim is way more of the comfort, it seems, for him. So they're going to stick with their Karazim to close out the draft. And Tempo Storm ended up keeping with the solo warrior stitches, so I think that we should see Fury on that, and then Kothan switch to one of the supports, probably Ariel, and then Psalm on Illidan with Caterpillar playing Vala. That's how I see this composition working out for them.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And it's just how... I mean, the draft on the side of Tempo Storm, it's got the double support, it's got the Vala hypercarry, and it's got an Illidan double threat. It's awesome. Everything about it. They don't have necessarily most ideal follow-up to Stitches when he gets a hook. You know, Uther is really kind of the only thing other than Detainment Strike and maybe Rain of Vengeance. But overall, Tempo is sticking to a classic composition. The only thing that is, again, Stitches is a little bit out of place, but he's such a good frontliner anyways. But, you know, I don't hate what Naventic's managed to draft so far. It's just, I feel like Tempo has a little bit more meta and a little bit easier to carry style composition, and already I kind of gave them the edge in terms of overall skill, to where I don't feel like Naventic got enough to be like, you know what, they might be able to take this.
You know, now that I'm looking at it, the Falstad may have even been an adjustment where Naventic wanted to get their Lunara, but then in seeing the Stitches come out, wanting somebody who has escape right from the start instead of having to wait until you had Leaping Strike. Yes, she's able to bound away, but she also is very weak, and if he can barrel roll away, get the shielding from that, come in with a Karazim dash, they have a lot of mobility in what Team Naventic have now drafted to try to get away from hooks.
Yeah, that's a good point. You know, at least then you aren't sticking around the 10 and always relying on that, because Karazim's also a support who relies on the 10 to be anywhere near that. So you gain breathing room in the 1 through 9, and we know that that is absolutely necessary in a map like BOE. I'm still not convinced. Again, with I love globals. I'm just a little bit torn on if the double global is going to work out for Naventic, because you heard it from Tomster. He wanted aggressive compositions. Do you look at Naventic as a full aggro? No, it's macro play. And that's not bad. I am a huge advocate for macro play. It's just, you know, this team has always been known to be the ones who's getting the kills. And right now, they seem to be more responsive than forcing the hand of Tempo.
Yeah, we'll see how patient they can be with those globals, or if they come in too early for the fight. We're going into game number 1 between Tempo Storm and Naventic on Battlefield of Eternity.
It's going to start here with Naventic in the blue, where Zuna is on the Dahaka. We have Greymane played by Big Impact. Tomster on his new role there with Karazim. B-Kid repping the front line. He's on a new. And we have Falstad played by iDream.
And in the blue, Tempo Storm. In the red, actually, June playing Uther. Fury playing Stitches. Up next, Ariel played by Kothan Luck. Illidan played by Psalm. And finally, Caterpillar will be playing Vala.
Falstad not moving into the season marksman at level 1. Instead going with Gathering Storm. Is that correct?
Yep.
Gathering Storm. You know, sometimes.
Yeah, there's a Gathering Storm and a Rising Storm. So sometimes it could play tricks with your brain. But yes, that is Gathering Storm.
I had a moment there where I was like, I'm almost 100% sure, but that 1%'s enough for me to ask. Okay, so going with that, you know, on a map like Battlefield of Eternity, this talent makes a lot of sense, even if you are the side soaker. Just because the amount of time and delay in between the Immortals, amount of poke you get into that, eventually is going to add up to a pretty significant amount. Your boomerangs can suddenly chunk. I mean, it's not as good as the unnerfed Gathering Storm we know long ago with the 2-to-1 ratio, but it's still very, very good. And sadly, Naventic need to take a mini here.
quick pause in the game. We'll get back to that as soon as we can. So the Gathering Storm was there. Also, on the other side, Tempo Storm, Caterpillar, we're once again seeing not go into the Hungering Arrow build. Excuse me.
It's all good. I definitely heard you dying a little bit there. And so I'm just going to talk so I feel dead air.
Caterpillar, not Hungering Arrow build for Vala.
Yeah, so he's going to be focusing on building that hope, which we talked about yesterday. We've seen teams go into the Q build and then avoid it on maps where traditionally you would expect it, like a map at VOE, not going with the race chase. It's all about enabling Ariel to have more healing. Her cross supporting is just, it's amazing. It's almost unrivaled, really, at this state of the game with how all the other supports have been touched over time. She's one of the few with still a massive AoE heal, and it's a nice setup there to be able to move into that. And
No Tomorrow did the same thing, so it must be that these teams that are scrimming each other a lot are starting to trend toward these same things, which we pick up things from each other when they scrim. That is kind of how it works, how the regional meta will develop, and we've seen a lot of that so far. Otherwise, things looked pretty standard to me, talent-wise. Anything that stands out to you?
I don't think so. We got Iron Fist, but I mean, nothing crazy. Psalm didn't pick anything unique up for the Illidan, so it's just going to be a normal game here, at least so far at level 1. But again, when looking at the early stages, I'm trying to figure out levels 1 through 9. That's probably most important when looking at the Immortal. How is it going to play out? I do feel like I give a slight upper hand to Naventic. I do think that with the ability with the Dahaka and again the False Dad, and then just their skirmishing potential is actually really good in the earlier stages. It is still good for Tempo. Don't get me wrong. They've got the trifecta, but I feel like they really can catch people off guard with the early pressure, especially the Karazim that they might have. It's just all on whether or not they get that side, so get that experience. I feel like if Naventic wins this game, it's because they play it like Roll 20. They worry about the slow game, stall, delay, skirmish, get enough experience advantage, and then suddenly you're like, here's where the big Immortal hits with a major power spike.
Jed, we talked about Tempo Storm and the fact that, yes, they have lost 2 matches, but it was to 2 teams, No Tomorrow and Gale Force Esports, that have looked really strong so far at the beginning of Phase 1. What would it mean to Tempo Storm if they were to lose this series now to Team Naventic?
I mean, it's a serious question, and one that I can't tell you exactly what they think specifically. Like, every team could react differently. I'll tell you this much. If it was me in their position, it would be devastating. It would be when you are at the top of North America for that long and you don't have a blatant, like, huge hole into your play, you set a kind of bar that your autopilot should just even be above. And I would say if I was Tempo Storm, I would say my autopilot is above that. Like, even in the worst kind of day, you know, unless somebody's completely gone, I would expect that at least a 3-1 is realistic. Maybe you have a blooper in a moment. That kind of stuff can happen. But it would be mentally, I would be just done. At that point, I would be like, need to take a step, take a breath away, like step and take a mini, because we should not be this poor with that minor of a change.
Yeah, Tempo Storm has been at the top of the North American region since the beginning of the fall season of last year, where they came together. They weren't even Tempo Storm at that point yet, had not been picked up by Tempo Storm, but this group of players came together. It was June's first LAN. Yeah,
June's first LAN, you know, and he had an amazing performance the very first time that he came in. I mean, he flat out walked up, first tournament, won it. Second tournament, won it. I got to the point where he had no idea, like, where do I stop, you know, in terms of his climb.
Yeah.
I thought you had more to say. I was literally just saving you because of your voice.
We're going to take a break, guys, so that I can fix this and we can fix that. We'll be right back.
I once ruled Ashul Nerub. Then came a war I could not win. I was forced into servitude. But here, in this strange place, no one commands my power. I will conquer the Nexus. Those who oppose me shall embrace the web of death. I am a Nubarak. I ruled once before. I shall rule again.
I was told this suit would be my prison. Suits me just fine.
Been called a lot of things,
A renegade, an outlaw. Guilty as charged. Makes life exciting. You never know who or what will be on your side. So when the Nexus King called it, there was only one thing to say. Hell, it's about time. Fresh meat.
Welcome back to HGC. We are still waiting. We had to remake the game, so we'll be back in for game number 1 between Tempo Storm and Naventic shortly. Now, we've talked a lot about Tempo Storm. Let's talk about Naventic, because Naventic came in with iDream. They had a brand new roster and yet did not come out with a bang like maybe we thought they would.
I mean, I feel like at this point, that just shows that the overall core of, Naventic in general, it's kind of just hit the point where it's, for me, it's been long enough to where it just seems that there's a core problem, right? I don't think, I'm not taking anything away from those players. I'll still say it, like Izuna, I think, is one of the best players we have in the entire region. Big Impact sits at the top of that. Tomster, too. It's just that it feels like together that none of those players can really thrive under these circumstances. Granted, if they do seem to be recovering here this week, I feel like maybe I'm ready to be proven wrong, I feel like is what I say about that.
Yeah, it will take some time to get Tomster in because they started with Big Impact wanting to have him support, did that for a week, did not like how things were going, and then decided that they would make the adjustment. So it seems to me more like Naventic is willing to play the long game, but I think we're about ready to get into the game.
I think so. Are we ready for this? Let's go. It's going to be Battlefield of Eternity Game 1 between Tempo and Naventic. Or I guess that way, huh?
You got it.
Got to get better about my pointing at screens.
Nailed it.
It's a new thing I'm working on. Gilly, I hate to inform you this, but all the talents are the exact same as last game. So
yeah. I think that is a requirement of a regame, is it not?
Is it? I don't know. Actually, I think before any kills technically happen, I actually don't know the official ruling on that, but I feel like if the kills happen, it changes whether or not that's a real thing. But because nothing happened, essentially a minion died. We got the remake here. We're ready to go. Dahaka and Falstad waiting on the side there, the double global here for Naventic early on.
I think Kalefoss heated up my tea because that was a hot one. I'm ready to go.
She's ready. We are prepared, It took a minute, maybe a little bit longer than we thought it would be, but we are, in fact, ready for this series.
So, yes, there's the double global against the Illidan up in the top lane. Drag connects. Falstad there, too. Psalm A-OK, but does have to use his well tap. Meanwhile, Tempo Storm, in recognizing that there are 2 up in the top, can try to push this bottom lane, but have to know that there can be a point where a global comes in from behind them, potentially.
Yeah, this hurts a little bit for Naventic, not having the Gathering Storm committed to the 4-man. It's one of those talents that you just want as many targets to hit as possible, like the extended Lightning of Alarak, for instance. It's just useless into the solo. It's not that, Gathering Storm doesn't have value into the 1v1s. It's just not nearly as good. So I can understand why we see this out of Naventic. Stacking the globals allows you to essentially just move one out at any point and get pressure into this lane mismatch. But it's something that maybe as the game moves on might come back to haunt Naventic.
We'll see if one of the globals come down to the bottom lane while the immortals are starting to spawn. For right now, Tempo Storm really wanted to make sure that they could take out both of those towers and the gate, open that up before they start to rotate into the Immortal fight.
So here it is. It's the Dahaka side soak, Falstad side soak, the 3-man pressure and defense squad. The Anubarak, the Karazim, and again the Grey Mane. My concern was that they have no kill potential whatsoever because of the not having the CC onto the support, but maybe, you know, Tomster's Iron Fists are enough to justify that lack of crowd control.
Yeah, it's all about how long Naventic can hold out this first half of the phase. The second half is really hard to defend because it spawns in the positions where it's easiest for you to attack. It's closer to your base. So how long Team Naventic can hold in this first half with the Immortal while having both Falstad and Dahaka side soaking. But Tempo Storm are just trying to respond as best they can. The nice thing for Naventic, though, is with this double support composition, it separates out the composition from being a full 5-man team. But with a hook connecting, Big Impact solo, but is saved in the nick of time. Yeah,
really huge shout out to Cawthon, actually, for being on a, you know, the off roll for him, the flex, ranged flex of Tempo Storm, and still being able to have perfect positioning on that detainment strike. Naventic, though, was able to find Psalm off kind of doing his own thing, and got the solid punishment. There's first blood over to Naventic.
And Naventic starting to get further ahead thanks to that first blood and the amount of time they've been able to spend in the lanes for this first part. They have about a half-level lead thus far. Tempo Storm goes to defense mode until they can get Illidan back out.
Oh man, the drag there is going to be dropped.
Biggie.
This knock up, the impale, the damage is there, but Fury, he is just barely making it out. Not long enough though. He ends up going down.
And this is staggered death.
Yeah, this is huge. Naventic should be losing. Again, I talked about all the dynamic of how they played this early part, and they're winning it so heavily that I am just absolutely amazed. B-Kid there stays a little bit too long for that burrow charge though, and it's really nice punishment, fighting back from Tempo.
Cattle did a great job of keeping Cawthon fuller on energy while the fight was going down over Stitches, and that's why Stitches was able to stay alive for as long as he did. But in the end, Tempo Storm still did lose one, recovering with that one kill. They are almost a level behind, but we're finally getting a moment where they could push over to this halfway point and just finish out the Immortal phase now.
Tempo very much is going to be able to win this secondary half. Just how much shielding does Naventic let them have? It looks like we find ourselves in between the 50 and 25. Experience close enough here, so Tempo should be able to scale the XP back by taking out the front wall. Past that, the fort is unrealistic, depending on how many picks they manage to have. And Illidan is going to be the side soak here, so it's all about having the Stitches and the Vala with the double supporting there, get that pressure out.
And June will be watching to see if Fury can get a hook once the gate goes down. And meanwhile, Naventic, it's down to them trying to get the Immortal into melee mode, so they have a little bit of an easier time attacking it. But you can see Tomster staying back. He does not want to get hit by one of those stuns.
Nice dodge on the hook there. Allows them to be able to get free posturing, because whenever you see a hook like that, you go 16 seconds until we have to worry about the next one. Move up, be able to rid that Immortal. But Tempo Storm has got a lot of free damage onto this fort, so much so that they should be able to pick this up on even just the first Immortal without that much shielding. Naventic here playing a little bit too safe.
They're playing really safe, but it can be scary when you're up against an Ariel who can detainment strike you right against your own fort. That could give enough time for a stun to come out from the Immortal. You've got a Hammer of Justice possibly too, so there are a lot of scary things in what Tempo Storm have to try to defend against, but it does catch Tempo Storm up in experience and get rid of one of Naventic's forts.
So what is Naventic going to do with their downtime here? Looks like they're trying to match the Khazar camp that Tempo just got up on top of a couple seconds later, but not too late. They should get this for free here. Psalm, though, questioning if he wanted to move in once he sees the capture sign, realizing that's not an option. And it's just going to be patient clear in this downtime. Battlefield of Eternity is a map that doesn't have a lot of things to take advantage of up until forts start falling and 10 spikes start hitting. Then death timers are long enough to where you're like, well, maybe we get this fort with that pick here and maybe a kill there.
Drag.
Wow.
Perfect drag. Vala is out of here. Naventic gets a kill on the battery of Ariel.
I love that. Naventic, I was just talking about how it's very rare that we see that kind of playmaking happening in the downtime between the actual Immortals. And they're like, oh, check this one out. Nice drag there from Zuna, set everybody up, and now that allows them to get the invade on Tempo's Shaman camp. That's going to be a huge setback as long as Naventic actually times their Shaman camp perfectly. Suddenly, it's very lopsided because, again, The global advantage here is over to Naventic, at least up until the pre-10 mark, but still the double global can 2v1 into the Illidan, and his free clear, or what should be free clear, is suddenly not so free with this double global that Naventic's drafted.
Yeah, what's really nice is stealing those Shaman. Team Naventic now don't have to worry about that Shaman pushing up toward their keep structures. Fury hits a hook, but it's Tomster. He can dash out. But that allows Team Naventic to choose. They're not forced to defend at any point. They get to choose when they want to have the globals in the lane and when they want to converge and collapse and try to get picks. And with them getting closer and closer to heroic abilities, it's possible we see them try to set up, look to see where some of the members of Tempo Storm are, and get picks as soon as they get those heroic abilities. I have to ask, do you think we're going to have Gust and then a 7-sided strike as a sort of being able to isolate somebody and just get them picked, especially with the limited mobility of Stitches?
I'm guessing it's Palm Gust. I can see the 7-sided argument here with the isolation tools that they have onto the team. But even then, I feel like Naventic, I don't know, it is going to be the Palm. All right. So I can see with, especially when you have a new guy learning the new role like Tomster, playing it safe and going with more of the 7-sided to ensure you get some kind of value. But it is such a huge risk to see that kind of pick. And they stick to the norm as the halftime show was kicked off by Tempo, or excuse me, by Naventic.
Yeah, Naventic were able to use those heroics. Drag forces Divine Shield to be used early on in this fight. So well done by Zuna. He's been playing a ton of Dahaka here in phase number 2. Heroics over on the side of Tempo Storm, both of these support heroics that you see standard, Divine Shield and Crystal Aegis. Reign of Vengeance, though, as a potential follow-up after this. There's a Tame and Strike. Hunt comes in as well, trying to take down Tomster. He palms himself. He'll have a little bit of time where he can stay alive. Fury's still there. He's dropped the bile. Som's starting to take some damage, but a nice Reign of Vengeance hits 3.
Yeah, nice rain there, and the members of Naventic are just a little bit too low. The drag goes into June, though, and that's enough to pick up the kill. Now, Psalm should have a couple of heals thanks to June in that Uther, and because he got the pick onto iDream now, he's just looking full aggro, doing the Illidan dance, and securing another kill here for Tempo as they found a 2-for-1 trade, and what looks like it's going to be at least half of this Immortal's HP.
They're going to get as much of this as they can. Falstad will be up in 8 seconds. He can try to come back in. Same with Dahaka. It was the 2 globals who got taken out, but still Dahaka 8 more seconds, and Tempo Storm are putting in work at this Immortal.
Yeah, they're doing so much there, and now they feel enough pressure coming up from Naventic. They're going to back, look for the tap, and that is when the reinitiation is going to happen. Gilly, the double globe has been picked up for Naventic, but we're, other than probably the first start of the first Immortal phase, yet to see that kind of threat onto those side lanes when it comes to the experience. Tempo Storm has been taking 5-on-5s left and right.
Yeah, and that is what we were kind of afraid of for Team Naventic, is because they want to look for the team fights, because that's how they play this battleground, that Tempo Storm would be able to bait in those globals to try to take a fight. And as long as Tempo Storm can trade out evenly or even get ahead, like in the last fight, then they're keeping Naventic from doing what their composition excels at, which is having those globals in the side lane and getting experience advantage.
They're going to all in on Fury here, though. Reign of Vengeance getting a lot of people in there, knocking down 3. Psalm finds himself alone after that beautiful gust from iDream. The hook lands, though. The bird barrel rolls out.
Barrel rolls out just away from the Reign of Vengeance, too. Psalm has the aggro of all of Naventic, forcing Divine Shield, but this gives him time to throw in more damage. Cattle shows up, flanking from the side, has a multi-shot, but still no kills. But just once again, Tempo Storm are able to either win the fight by getting picks or push away Team Naventic long enough that they're able to get the Immortal.
And now with another Immortal, even healthier in the shielding than it was in the last time. And the map opening up a bit more, and Tempo Storm should be able to make a lot happen with this Immortal. It's getting darker and darker for Naventic as the time moves on throughout this game, but they are at least even in experience. They will find themselves close, except if BK gets picked there. Nice use of the burrow charge. He is able to dodge the Immortal stun.
Yeah, and that is why Team Naventic wanted to have so many heroes with escapes. They can get away from the hook and the potential follow-up of the CC if it's just not quite there. Things going down. Remembering to keep an eye on that vent for a Dahaka brush stock in. Tempo Storm steps forward, trying to use his 13 advantage and the Immortal health that is left to take out the front wall of this keep.
Once the wall down, then you got to look for the Stitches hook. Anytime between the well and the fort is always a prime area. That's why nobody ever wants to walk in between that choke. Now that the well's down, at least there's a little bit more room to mess around. But Tempo wants nothing to do with this. They walk away with their level advantage and say, that's enough for us. We'll worry about painting the map red and then worry about pressuring things later on with the 16 talent tier over you.
13 being picked up from Team Naventic. We've got Flow Rider for Falstad, so focusing more on having his abilities up more, which pairs nicely with the fact that he went into Gathering Storm.
Yeah, it's the synergy between full, Boomerang Gathering Storm build is actually insane. Even the 16 synergy, I think it's with Airy Winds?
Gary Gusts?
Gary Gusts.
Gary Gusts.
Gary Gusts. Nice ability to get out of max range there on the hook. Nobody's going to fight yet. It's interesting Tempo is willing to dabble into this, but I guess a lot of it comes down to the fact that Dahako has displayed himself in the southern lane. Tempo's not making much happen, though, with that window. They backed out very early, and normally when we see teams do that, it's through they're trying to manipulate the Merc camps heavy enough that they make a poor lane rotation, and then you get a pick there. Tempo only grabbed one camp, and then has kind of just been in this bit of a limbo around the map since then.
It seems like they were expecting Naventic to try to invade their Shaman because they were hanging out for a long time around here, but then in seeing the Shaman get picked up on Naventic's side of the battleground now, just picking these up, making sure that they'll have this pressure going while the Immortals are spawned. But at the other side of this, Tempo Storm are also going to have Immortals, or a Shaman pushing against them. Though, Som is in the bottom lane and can clear those out, hunt in if a fight is going unfavorably and he's needed.
Well, we've got 13 seconds for these Immortals to come back online. And again, Naventic has yet to win both the first or the second Immortal. And really, honestly, it feels like it hasn't been that close. They've done well with the first phase, but then the fight happens, they struggle, and that's when Tempo go ahead and take what they feel is theirs. This is going to be a very defensive spawn for both the teams that benefits Tempo purely because of the experience advantage that they have. It should benefit Naventic because they have double global for side soak, but they have, again, yet to be able to abuse that benefit of their composition.
If Naventic see Tempo Storm start to step out, it is possible that maybe they could get a global out behind them. And you see Tempo Storm is checking all of those vents, trying to make sure that there isn't going to be a flank from somebody, but especially Dahaka, because Zuna has been landing those drags on crucial targets. Caterpillar, when he was able to catch Vala. If he could get Vala at the start of a fight, that would be horrible for Tempo Storm.
Yeah, and also you can see with June specifically, I mean, I would argue that June's support play has been a bit more panicked since the midseason brawl. But specifically with Uther, it feels like without having that cleanse, he questions when to Divine Shield. So much so that he's willing to use it very, very early on certain targets that may not die and won't get very much value out of it. So I wonder if we see that drag again on the Cattle, that could come to light. But look at the pressure Tempo has, forcing a gust that fast. At least they've been able to get rid of the cocoon.
The hook, I Dream, is gone so very quickly, and now Tempo Storm feels confident to continue the engage from there. B-Kid the next to fall. Tempo Storm are happy with those 2 kills, quickly turning their focus onto the Immortal. And that really does seem to be the theme of the team fights in this game. Whoever starts it is usually the one who is able to get the kill fast and secure the fight, the win in the team fight. And that being the hook, so good, the gust, making that be used earlier on too. But if Team Naventic can do the same, force out some of those support heroics like an Aegis maybe or a Divine Shield, even utilizing the cocoon that they have on one of the supports, they've been trying to do that. They just haven't yet been able to find success of getting the first kill, really.
Yeah, and it's interesting you say that because Illidan and Stitches are both heroes that kind of suffer from that. Illidan's actually a little bit better at getting the counter initiation when things happen that way, but yeah, the Stitches, it makes a lot of sense when he's going to struggle. But with the 16, having the slow on the Pulverize makes him a lot better at that. Tomster luckily has a minion to be able to dash out. But this Gilly is now what could be a game-winning Immortal. It's not necessarily. It all comes down to the fences that we see out in Naventic as they're grasping for the 16. We'll be able to pick it up once Illidan pushes out the bottom wave. But, I mean, it's only going to take 2 to 3 picks here, and that could be GG's.
Yeah, the big spike has come in for Tempo Storm, having Wrath of Heaven along with Frost Shot. We've got Marked for Death too, and then the Slam build getting pulverized there is always a gigantic spike for Stitches. And Benediction too, even with its cooldown being increased with the last patch. But Naventic now hitting 16, so they could have that big spike of their own. They're getting Executioner, they've got Elongated Tongue, and Zuna will use it, getting a pick on Fury.
The Gus now leaving Fury in a lone island once more. He drew the Divine Shield. Now the Immortal is out of its shielding, but it's trying to get onto the keep. Psalm got a Hammer of Justice. Look at the detainment strike there onto Zuna. He's trying to get the adaptation and the burrow charge from B-Kid, but nobody's going down yet. Psalm comes back in with the hunt. June tries to throw down the hammer, and B-Kid is on full retreat as he takes a palm. And Tomster healing everyone up. Can he make it out? He can, but it costs them Zuna.
And iDream. Falstad goes down. Immortal on core. Tempo Storm are going to walk away with this game number 1. That whole fight, Cattle was completely untouched except for that one burrow charge that grabbed just about everybody from Tempo Storm. But other than that, just constantly throwing out his arrows, keeping Ariel topped up in the energy, and allowing Psalm to just go, go, go. Tempo Storm wins game 1.
Yeah, convincing fashion. And again, with the things I said about the map and knowing the drafting, I did feel like that was going to be the best odds here for Naventic. So just, it's not that they can't, it's just going to be another step back and another step back. I would like to see Naventic kind of do what we saw from Tomster's interview talking about the offense. I often talk to you about specific heroes and strategies that feel better even though they aren't necessarily, they feel like they keep you in a game even though they don't actually, and I feel like that's a little bit of what we see out of Naventic. They're a team that used to be known as an offense, but when things got bad, they started becoming more and more macro focused, and I personally feel like a lot of that comes down to, again, like, you can't lose hard when you have globals. They're always a band-aid to make up for your experience you're losing at all points of the game. Naventic, most of that game, had no control, but it looked like it was close to even because Zuna was always offside soaking. And so I just feel like Naventic has adopted this because it feels less bad, but it doesn't mean that it increases their odds of winning the game, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. It comes down to the fact that they have the globals, which put them in a spot that they always can get a fight that's not completely uneven.
Like one talent tier down in 3 levels, right?
Yeah.
You avoid that at all costs if you win in the global department.
Even at the end, they had 16 versus Tempo Storm 16. But actually being able to win the fight with what you have drafted is a completely different story.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at that, so that's like a compositional example. One that I've talked a lot with you in the past is Zeratul, is like that hero that because you have Void Prison, you almost never full wipe a team fight. You almost always are like, oh, things are really bad, here's my Void, you waste the cooldown. But when you look at how impactful Zeratul actually is and the odds of increasing your odds of winning, it's almost non-existent. It just stops your ability to lose fast. It's like Mule, but better. It's really the best way to put it.
Well, things look good, though, for Tempo Storm. Being able to kind of staunch the bleeding from what they have had in their losing streak of last weekend is good. Getting a victory over Naventic on Battlefield of Eternity, because they, too, I'm sure, are feeling like that would be the biggest hurdle for them, especially since they are typical to ban Infernal Shrines. Yeah,
I'm trying to think of, like, for me, the one thing that did seem a bit of a question mark on Tempo and learning the offense and learning the aggression that we want to see out of them was that top fort that they did end up getting, where I was still like, I don't know if they should be able to get this as free as they did, and I'm still questioning, was that Naventic's passivity? Passiveness, whatever word I'm supposed to.
Passivity is the right word.
Nailed it.
Don't question yourself.
Passivity. And then, or was that Tempo's offense, right? Tempo had reasonable posturing, and they did look for the hook, which is something where in the past they wouldn't even burn a resource. But that was about all they burned, and I'm still gauging on whether or not I felt like that was enough. But they still held a lot of the game and had control most of it. I just want to see that very quick ending, that just execution, cutthroat mentality out of Tempo. Yeah, my question was going to be for this series is, could Naventic punish Tempo Storm if they were still making the same kind of brazen plays, pushes,